All right, here we go, y'all. Here we go. Another episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your man, Calvin Gibbs, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to let loose on comedy. We're going to let loose on comedy. We're going to have a conversation that's not going to be too stressful. It's not going to uh, be anything about world war or hunger or famine, anything like that. We're going to talk about funny stuff. We're going to talk about comedy. What is comedy these days? And with me, I have a dynamic panelist group here this evening. Please welcome to the show, Charlie.
Kelvin, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, sir. We also have Marset. Marset, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. We also have Amy. Amy, good evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
And we have Kaushal. Kaushal, welcome back.
Thanks a lot. Great to be
Yes,
here.
yes, sir. And we have Dan. Hey, Dan.
Hey, good to see
Hey,
everyone.
yes, indeed. And we have a special panelist with us this evening. He's actually a professional comedian. I've known him for a couple decades now, and we're glad to have him with us this evening. Welcome, Frank Townsend.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it. I've been thinking a lot about comedy lately. There was a time when I would watch nothing but comedies on TV. Growing up, watching Lucille Ball and all the other comedians, and they would often say things and do things that might not be appreciated in today's culture. And I find myself today watching less and less comedy because it seems like nothing's funny anymore. So let's delve into this. Does anybody else feel like nothing is really funny anymore? Anybody that wants to jump in and take this one, please feel free.
When you say nothing's funny, are you saying that you don't find the material funny that comedians are producing, or are you saying that we've created a society that that takes everything too seriously,
What I mean is just
or a
the,
combination of the two?
well, a combination, but really the latter, because there's things that used to be funny that we don't laugh at anymore. We all have stress. The world is a stressful place. It's
Right.
hard to laugh at things when you're not feeling jovial, you know, for example. So is it just me, or that is anybody else uh feeling less the effects of comedy these days? It's cool if it's just me. Amy?
No, I would agree. I've been trying to think of one of the last times that I actually like full out laughed at comedy. Um, I sort of entertain myself with true crime. So watch out, don't cross me. I would love to return to just laughing and watching something that is lighter and not something that ends with depressing. And I had not ever tied together that maybe just life is too stressful to allow yourself to be vulnerable and laugh. But you're really getting me thinking about that right now that you've brought that up.
Okay. Because for me, it's a strange feeling because I used to be the joker in the room when I was with friends. And I'm not depressed, but it just feels like something's missing. I'm going to ask Frank, since he's the expert in the
Mm.
room. Frank, have you uh, had to work any harder at getting a laugh these days from people?
Um, Actually, no, because here's a difference. If you're in a comedy club, it's still, yeah, we get a couple of sensitive people to come in there, but when you're in a comedy club, the laughs are the same. You stay the same jokes, the same stuff that we've been saying for years, you can say in a comedy club. Yeah, you might get a random Karen or two in there, but for the most part, comedy clubs are safe. The thing is, when you're talking about, I think, like social media, let's say when the lights are on, that's when it's different. When you're talking to a group of people, or if you're saying something online or watching something online, that's when all the people who should not be in this conversation are in it.
Hmm.
Now, no, because think about it, social media allows you to click on anything.
Right.
And it's stuff that might not have anything to do with you. It might be a topic that you should never be talking about or listening to. And it might be funny to the people who are supposed to be listening to that. Social media has allowed people into every venue that they have no business going.
This is true. But even with social media, I remember a time when you could make fun of anything and everything. I mean, you could make fun of your friends, your family, your
Yeah.
religion, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your weight, your height, your hair, your clothes. You could make fun of yourself and no one would get offended. But nowadays,
Exactly.
even if you make fun of yourself, you're going to you stand the chance of getting some backlash. Okay, it could be
Yes, you definitely do.
it could be in the form getting canceled, having somebody write a blog about you, um, have somebody come on and give you some bad press. So, Kaushal, I'm gonna ask you, um, is there anything that you think that was funny at one point in time is not funny these days?
I I'm really kind of torn on this. On one hand, I do think Frank is right that in comedy clubs, the kind of humor that you could say in them really is the same. And I love what Frank said that social media has given everybody a little too much access to to things that they that wouldn't have made them mad if they just didn't click on these things. But I do think there is some change going on uh, in that uh, like punching down on people for their ethnicity or other immutable characteristics, I think is somewhat frowned upon now. And I can think of a couple of examples where I got this from. One is the book uh, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, in which he brought up a point that it's really not a good thing to do ethnic jokes because um, that that kind of perpetuates the negative feelings people have about those ethnicities and it can actually lead to continued violence against them. I'm not sure I completely agree with him, but I can kind of see his point. The other example I can think of is uh, the Apu character on the Simpsons show. He was voiced by the actor Hank Azaria, and he actually apologized for voicing that character because he felt it led to bullying and violence against minorities. And I have to admit, I also have engaged with ethnic jokes and laughing at such stuff, and even if directed at my ethnicity. But now hearing those points of view, I'm not sure I want to laugh at that kind of humor anymore, even though I don't necessarily judge people who do, but I'm not as quick to laugh at it myself.
Okay, fair. Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that. So I'm glad you mentioned ethnicity. Um, that in a lot of cases is a taboo subject. Professional comedians, they take a lot of flack. For example, if you want to make jokes about African Americans these days, okay, you might want to think twice about that because there's going to be some smoke that comes with that. By the same token, I hear African Americans making jokes about everybody else. And I just personally think that there should be some smoke that goes along with that as well. I've had the conversation with my wife about it, and we cannot come to an agreement. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask Charlie, and then Marcette. Your thoughts on what I just said?
This is such a highly subjective topic, and again, we could argue all the episodes we've done has been subjective, but this is particularly subjective. As some of you know, I've worked in theater with Calvin. I've also worked in theater with Amy as well, and we've done comedic things. I've done a lot of acting. I've appeared in a lot of comedies and theater. I've also done some independent films, which are comedy, and and I could go on and on about this. It's very subjective. It is constantly evolving type of comedy. I was trying to think of some short thing I could say tonight. Just an example. I'm going to try this. So I was just looking up, some list of greatest stand-up comedians of all time. And the two names I saw a lot in the list was Richard Pryor and George Carlin. Both these individuals were alive basically about the same period of time. Both went to a pit, they were kind of back in the 60s, they were kind of mainstream guys, just telling jokes and they wore a suit and a tie. And both of them went through different kinds of epiphany about how their act was going to be. Pryor's became more about his unusual personal life and all that, and Carlin's became more observational. And then once those two did that, then their career started soaring there because the stuff they were putting out there was brilliant. But they had to go through that process of doing that, and finding insight. And of course, it was the 60s and 70s, and a lot of things were going on then. It's really hard for me personally to say that. I'm not a big fan ever of ethnic jokes, personally, but there's some things that make me laugh. I was in a film once, and the reason I did the film was I'm a big fan of the movie Animal House. And I got the script, and I said, I always wanted to do an Animal House movie, and this is the closest thing I'm going to get to it. And that's why I did it. They sent me the script. I like the jokes in it, and all that. But that Animal House or even my film may not be everybody's taste, and everybody has different taste on this. So this is such a broad subject. It's really hard for me to speak in broad generalizations about it.
Okay, but I do want to offer a different point of view. When you mentioned Richard Pryor, I thought his his work was observational as well.
Correct. I agree with that.
One thing that always stood out with me was this routine he did talking about when he shot up his car and somebody called the cops on him.
Right.
Then he went inside because the cops got guns too, and they don't shoot cars, they shoot N-word R's. Okay. And I thought that was hilarious. But but in this environment today, could a white comedian get away with saying that, Marcette?
I don't know. I think I think comedy and politics and race kind of intersect in that one weird way. I think a lot of the better comedians can use it to get a point across, to get us to open a discussion and a dialogue about things. Some of the worst comedians, it comes off as crass and kind of heavy footed. Yeah, and it just depends on the audience too. I think like the brother said earlier, if you're in a comedy club, a lot of times you're kind of, you primed yourself mentally, like, okay, I'm going to hear something in here that could be edgy. I may or may not agree with it, but alas, I'm in a comedy club. Whereas walking down the street, on your way to your lunch break or something, someone says something under the guise of comedy, you may take it, you may take it personally. I try to, I know they mentioned earlier a lot of the ethnic characters. Someone mentioned the Simpsons and all, and I've had conversation around that a lot too. And I kind of use it. I kind of take it off of ethnicity. I say, all right, if I come out and make a joke about, guys with orange shirts sure are a-holes, da, 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 da. clearly, if you're looking at me, well, this guy has on an orange shirt. I don't think he's really calling himself an a-hole. There's a comedic bend to it somewhere, and then you'll follow it. Guy comes on and says the same thing about guys with orange shirts, and he's wearing a blue shirt. And this is for me where it kind of intersects. Maybe he does mean it. Maybe, and I think that that's kind of the bind that we find ourselves in. A lot of times people say things or do things under the guise of comedy when they really may have ulterior motive that's less than honorable. So you never know, because if you're in the room and you're saying I'm making this joke at the Senate banquet or whatever, and I'm saying something, yeah, and when a senator says, hey, well, damn, he's right. I've always thought that growing up in Texarkana or wherever I grew up, let me draft a bill about these orange shirts guys. And that's always kind of in the back of your mind when you say certain things. How far is it going to go? Who's going to take it where? And I just may have been thinking about it one way or just in a humorous bend where someone can take it and with that power that they control or they have an audience to put it in front of someone with enough power to outlaw orange shirts or guys wearing orange shirts with white writing on it. And I think comedy and kind of race kind of hit that intersection of, is it really funny or is he saying it, or who's really listening to it, and how are they going to take it and run with it?
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that. Next question I'm going to ask for Dan
Can
and
I add something to that?
yeah,
Can I
sure,
add something
Frank.
to that?
Go ahead, Frank.
I'm gonna keep it quick. One of the things people don't realize is who is the joke written for? If I write a joke about gay people, can gay people laugh at that joke? If I write a joke, to me, that's my goal. Whatever group I'm writing about, they need to be able to laugh at this and see the humor in it. If they can't see the humor in it, then maybe I need to do something with this joke. Because it's easy to make a joke about black people that white people can laugh at. But can I make a joke about black people that black people can laugh at as well? So if it's a meanness, some jokes are written with a mean spirit. And that's the point of that comic. That's what they want to do. They have the right to do that. I don't necessarily write with a mean spirit. My goal is to make everybody laugh. And if I'm talking about a group, I want that group to laugh harder than anybody. Like one of the things I do, I work on cruise ships now, which is one of the touchiest places you could ever tell jokes. I was working for a cruise line for the first time, and they sent me a list of things not to talk about. Those are the first three things I talked about and got the biggest laughs because I know how to make that group laugh. If I include you in the joke, if I include you in on the laughter, on the comedy, and not just making fun of you, then I can say it. But if I'm making a joke about, like you said, people with orange shirts, where you're feeling victimized, it's like, hey, why am I being pointed out like this? But if it's something where you can laugh too, that's a really good joke to me.
Right.
So
Okay. All right.
you can
Thank you.
you can include those people in those jokes.
All right. That's a very good point of view, Frank. My next question is going to be for Dan and for Frank. And this is about some of the comedies that we watched during the Norman Lear eras, and particularly a show like Archie, like All in the Family with Archie Bunker. And then we had The Jeffersons with George Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Could we put shows like that on the air today? And would people response be the same? I mean, would they be top shows? Dan and Frank, either one of you can take that. Well, I want both of you to take it.
Okay.
Sure. I'll jump in. No, I don't think they'd succeed now. But we live in a time now where everybody's an expert after one TikTok video, including from war in Ukraine all the way to what whether, oat milk is milk. So, and they get offended very easily because of that. And they jump in and they think just like, it's kind of like when you go to a movie now and everybody's making noise because they were so used to watching it at home all the time. They don't realize there's now other people around them. It's the same kind of thing. The sense of humor is not there because they get offended immediately. So when you have something like an Archie Bunker, one of the things that was so clever about Archie Bunker is he offended everybody. He said stuff about blacks. He said stuff about Jews. He said stuff about women. He said, you name it, he went after it. And that was the genius of Norman Lear, is that he could teach a lesson through comedy because he was an equal opportunity offender.
So,
And I don't think that would work now because every group that was offended would be attacking the station saying, how dare you do that to my group?
so the lesson is over. There's nothing they wouldn't be able to learn anything today, is what you're saying.
They would be able to learn it in that kind of show and context. Yeah.
Okay. Frank, you're up.
Now, here's the funny part. I'm totally opposite of that. I think they should put that on, and I think it would work. But everything he said is correct. It will get the people attacking it. It will get the groups, the offended groups, to attack. But then the people who actually have common sense to see it for what it really is, that are connected to those groups, would go, no, you're totally missing the point. It would actually generate enough buzz to make the show super popular. And one of the things that's been most confusing to me is shows like Family Guy. Those shows are flat out offensive. There's nothing more offensive than anything that happens on Family Guy. But it works because I think, and the only thing me and my brother we talk about this, you can say anything as long as it's in a cartoon form. If an actual human said those lines, everybody would lose their minds. But if I had a show like Archie Bunker, and a quick point about Archie Bunker. Another part of the genius of it is that Archie Bunker was an idiot that was talking like he knew everything, which was part of the genius of the writing. But I would definitely, if I had an Archie Bunker show, I would love to put that on and let all of the groups complain and let all the people who actually look into the topic, I would let them bicker and watch my ratings go up.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, Frank. Thank you for that, Dan. That's some stuff we can definitely think about and chew on a little bit. I want to move a little bit to and what Frank said about Family Guy. Yeah, that is I don't get those shows, man. You know, you're right. They say anything and they come at everybody. And it does seem that because it's a animated series that they can easily get away with that. Because it's been on the show. It's been on the air for, I'm sure, at least over 15 years.
Oh, and a lot of people don't remember this. When it first came on, it bombed horribly. They took it off the air for about 2 years, 3 years, and brought it back. And then by that time, people had kind of caught up to it. Because when it first came out, everybody was offended and nobody was ready for it. When they relaunched it, they were like, oh, okay, I get what they're doing now. And it's been going ever since.
Okay.
There's a flip side to that as well with the 70s shows. In fact, I just happened to be reading about it a couple of days ago. And we'll mention Good Times as well there on that. Some of those shows started out where they were much more, how do I want to put it, cutting edge when they started out. And they were talking to one of the guys that created it. I think it was Mike Evans, played Lionel, was one of the creators. I forget the other guy's name. And they Norman Lear, of course, was supervising the show, and he didn't want it as cutting edge comedy. So if you watch like the first 2 or 3 years of it, it's more that way. And this, I believe, also happened to Jeffersons, which ran like 10 years, where it went from a little more whatever social cutting edge on it, just to more of a standard, a sitcom, yuck yuck show on it. But the show did run a long time. So my point being is that that also occurred back in the 70s as well.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Earlier this month, a comedian, Joe Coy, had the opportunity to host the Emmy Awards this year. And I did watch at least the opening monologue, and seemed like he had some problems there with his delivery. I'm probably Frank's laughing. I'm probably being nice, but he had a hard time with that, and social media lit his butt up afterward, and is still lighting his butt up.
Yeah.
When you think about comedy, I know part of it is the words, of course, but delivery, your your physical body, and as a Toastmaster, we know about this culture, and then the use of well-placed pauses. And it seemed like he wasn't doing any of that correctly. You can get away with a lot of stuff if if you're standing in the right position, take that pause and then follow it up. And he seemed like he just wanted the floor to open and let him through because it wasn't hitting. So so my question for you guys, have you noticed comedians, especially stand-up comedians, uh their delivery, especially if they may be saying something a bit off color, okay? Have you noticed anything that stands out? Anyone?
I'll say this.
Yes,
I'll
Frank.
say this. Whatever you say, you damn well better own it.
Mm.
I don't care how crass, how nice, how whatever. Whatever you say on that stage, into that mic, you better be willing to fight for it. Because somebody might call you on that joke. So if you don't feel comfortable saying it, don't say it at all. But if you're gonna say it with your chest.
Okay. And part of the reason that I asked that is because back in the day when I was on stage acting, we did a spoof of Good Times. And I played the James Evans part, yes, with the tight corduroy pants and all that stuff. And the flannel shirt.
That.
And the flannel shirt, it was hilarious. But I pulled it off, okay? And that Friday night, man, we had audience that they were like rolling down the aisles. They were laughing. It was a very successful show from the audience reaction. That Saturday matinee, same script, same delivery, and nothing. Crickets. And we would go into the dressing room between scenes, like, what's going on out there? So we come back out and we're trying to improvise. We're damn near throwing ourselves off the stage trying to get a laugh. And that's when I realized that it's not just the words, it's the body language when you're trying to push the joke out. A lot of times, what you have done with one audience group will be fine. But if it's not hitting with the next group, then you have to modify on the fly. Frank, would you
Oh
agree
yeah.
with that?
Yeah, sometimes, and the most important part to that, sometimes it's literally the audience. It's not, as a comic, I'll say this. I try my best to win every single battle, every audience. You try to win them over. Sometimes it's nothing you can do. Sometimes it literally is them. You have to realize what the situation is. Sometimes it is your delivery. Sometimes you need to punch it up. Sometimes you need to dial it back. Sometimes you just got to finish your set, get your money, and go home. Because it ain't gonna happen with these people.
I hear you. I hear you.
So
So, folks,
I've
let's
I've
go ahead.
actually been on stage and told the audience. I've told the audience once. I've told an audience that they should never ever be allowed to ever congregate together again.
Wow.
Audience, you people should. Y'all are horrible.
And that's when they started throwing stuff at you.
Right. Yeah.
No, at that point, they actually laughed at that point. I was like, no, because I did what I was supposed to do. You people did not do your part.
Uh,
I hear you. I hear you. So
yeah.
to finalize this part of the show, can we say that comedy is not dead, but some things are not considered funny because of social reasons, and probably never will be again? Kosho.
Yeah, I would think that. I would think that. I think the advent of social media has given literally everybody a platform, and that's on one hand that's a good thing, and on the other hand, it's not so good. I think earlier in the conversation, some people mentioned where you could talk about one group, just wear them out, and that's the group that's been used to being talked about. Now, other groups have a chance to throw snowballs back at the original group, and sometimes they don't like it. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, Calvin. I did a morning radio show in Central Florida for like 2 years, and I was the straight guy. I would do the news and the political commentary with two comedians. So I got a chance to kind of immerse myself in the comedy world a little bit, and it's definitely a skill. I think I'm fairly quick on my feet, quick witted or whatever, but I don't think I'm a comedian. I think I can tell a joke or ride on my dry humor or whatever, but it's definitely a skill. And I think to Frank's point, sometimes your audience they're just not with you. So I think there are a bunch of factors that convene at one time, and you do have to have you got to be able to sell yourself and your body language and your ability, your breathing and where you take a deliberate pause. No, I think all of those things. I think some people are just born with it and they tell great stories. And I think some people bang on their craft enough where they become great. So it's just there's just a lot of moving parts in it. If you can get 8 out of the 10 going for you, then you're better than most. But
Okay.
in this climate, even then, if you've got a killer joke and it's about a group, the killer jokes about that group are no longer allowed, then you go down in flames.
Okay. And Kosho, I want to ask you the same question.
I think maybe comedy is kind of like a mirror of society, and it kind of reflects on how society feels. So if these days we're feeling that certain jokes don't land, might be because we're just feeling a little too vulnerable about those issues. But maybe in time we'll feel a little bit more confident and accept those jokes. And I've been thinking about the comedian Dave Chappelle. With each special that comes out, he he manages to say a couple of things that offend a great many people, but he also makes you wonder, why did I feel offended by those jokes, but I laughed at everything else? He kind of forces you to think about how you really feel about issues. So I think there's a lot of value in comedy, as a discourse, just to really force us to think, to ask ourselves, what do we really think about each other?
Hmm. Okay. Well, I think just personally, one thing with Dave Chappelle nowadays is that he's gotten so much smoke from people about things he said that is how he gets back at them, by saying other things that somebody might find uh might have a problem with. So he, doubles down on it. And for him, for his audience, for his crowd, it works. And for those that don't like it, he's probably going to lose them. That's just my thoughts on it. So I'm going to give Amy and Charlie last comments on comedy and what's funny today.
I don't have a good what's funny today, but I do want to touch on a couple points that were made, particularly Franklin. I loved the you better own it. I think as someone who's been a performer, not at all a comic or comedian or anything like that, but as a performer, completely, if you are not invested in it, or at least convincing the audience that you're invested in it, don't get up there. Like you've already lost them. Something that I think about where that lands is if you're familiar with Midsummer Night's Dream and the play within the play at the end, if you ever started with that, I feel like the audience would just roll over because it's absolutely stupid. But going through an hour and a half of investing in the characters who are so earnestly going to put on this play, I've seen that play so many times with a number of different kinds of audiences, and they always roll out of their seats laughing at it. I think because you've built up to that point that even something that is so, the words might be hard to hear, farcical, old-fashioned, ridiculous, they believe that these characters are owning it, and I think that's what makes it funny. So I'm sorry I don't have a modern day commentary. Again, I'm here watching my true crime, trying to figure out how to get rid of my husband, so he better stay in line. But I really appreciate the disc. I'm kidding. Oh my gosh. I guess
Oh
I
my
didn't own
God.
that one off.
We're going to, now I got to edit that out. Okay.
No, he listens. This
That's
like,
comedy.
honey, I mentioned to you.
No,
You got to
she
listen
wants him
for
to
it.
hear that.
Yep.
She
Yep.
wants him to hear that.
I did. I deliberately said that. No, but thank you. This was really, really educational. And Charlie, take it away. Do better than I did, because I feel like I just
You
word
know,
vomited.
comedy's like you're on the cliff and you want to see how far out you go on the cliff. But the problem is that each one of us defines where the edge of the cliff is. And so you may have gone off the cliff already, or maybe you're just on there and you're just and you're at that perfect whatever apex, if you will, at the edge of the cliff. And then you've hit the sweet spot of comedy because you've gone, you've been able to go as far as you can on it. And at least, well, at least some people appreciate it, maybe not everybody. And it's just the same idea. And I've done plenty of plays where, yeah, the audience was great one night and the audience sucked the next day, basically. So, those things happen. I was in a comedy troupe at one point, and we did a show. It bombed. The creator was out there playing a part, and he started turning the audience and started ragging on them, basically, and telling how the whole thing sucked and everything like that. And then he walked off the stage, and the rest of us were just kind of sitting there, kind of stupid, what we're going to do next. And I finally just went, okay, what he said, and I just walked out. I didn't know what else to do at that point because I knew the whole thing was down the toilet at that point, And then probably the worst part is we went out to the bar afterwards and I was drinking with him. That was a bigger mistake, I think, because he was still talking about it. But that's how it goes. Comedy is on a cliff, and the best comedians go and try to get as close to that cliff as possible without falling off it, and being crushed.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Amy. As a last thought, comedy is supposed to be funny. It's supposed to make people laugh. That's what it does. But if no one is allowed to tell jokes, then comedy is dead. And I don't really know what the solution is. Maybe it's gone too far already. I really don't know. It does make a lot of sense to me that there's a correlation between general unhappiness in our society and the loss of good comedy. I still think there's a correlation between the two because we all have problems. And if we can't laugh at ourselves, then what? The world will be a much sadder place without the ability to find humor in the everyday happenings of life. That's how we generally have been able to deal with stress, right? We laugh. That's how you get rid of you feel good after a good hearty ha ha ha. Nothing in life nothing in nature was made to be funny. It's just the opposite. Okay. It's a serious thing uh, about nature. But if we were given the natural ability to laugh, then why not use it? right? My last thought was, what if, what if the key to a long and stressless life is being able to see the humor in things and even in yourself? And who's to say that it isn't? We're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, we will have our round robin discussion, which will be led by one of the panelists. We don't know what the topic is going to be when we come back on Diverse Talking Heads podcast. And we are back. This is Diverse Talking Heads podcast, and I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. We've been talking about comedy and what's funny these days and what's not funny. But now we're going to turn to current events. In most of the US for the last, well, since the second week of this year, we've been in a deep freeze. Some places have gotten foots, foot, feet of snow, foots, a lot of snow and ice and rain and all that good stuff. And it's been here in Illinois, it's been below zero temperatures and wind chills. I'm sure on the East Coast, they've gone through it as well. But I want to ask the panelists, when the weather is when the weather outside is frightful, what is your favorite beverage? What do you like to eat or drink to give you that warm, cozy feeling? Let's start with Dan.
Oh, glass of port.
Mm,
Kind of warms the insides. You're on mute there, Calvin.
is there anything special you like to eat as you drink the port?
No, I don't usually eat when I have pork because it's usually after the meal. Just stuff's a little heavier, some pasta, stews, thick soups. I really like
Mm,
thick soups with fresh bread. That I like in the winter. Just we do a lot more soups,
okay,
and we like them, make them good and thick.
okay. Sounds good. Thank you for that, Dan. Marcette, when it's cold,
Yeah, kind of.
when it's cold and
When it's
freezing in
cold,
Florida,
right?
what do you do to warm yourself up, sir?
Uh, for those blustery winter days in Florida, I usually, get a nice, refreshing glass of Kool-Aid to warm myself. No, I'm joking. When I was in Chicago, usually, or even here, it doesn't really get cold as a Midwest native, but I do soups also. My wife makes a really good homemade chicken soup, and we'll do that. And I like, comfort food, mashed potatoes or something along those lines. and I'll do. I'm kind of getting into the coffees now, so I may do
Mm,
I have a Keurig, so I'll do the little different flavored coffees or whatever. So that's pretty much it for me.
okay, sounds good. Charlie,
Alcohol. That's the first thing I thought of when you said. I didn't even put a specific on it. Alcohol.
just
Uh, I'm a notorious cheap beer drinker, so I have no taste whatsoever. Soups I agree with as well.
okay.
And then I'll leave it at that.
Okay, sounds good. Kosher,
There's really nothing like a glass of mulled wine when it's
mm,
really cold outside, especially if it's a Swedish glug, though that takes some time to prepare. And if I have to eat something with that, I wouldn't mind eating some high quality chocolate.
sounds good. Sounds good. Amy,
It's funny. I was just gonna actually say dark chocolate. I think your mulled wine got me thinking about that. But yes, it's not something I typically have in warmer weather. So like a rich dark chocolate, red wine, and then heavy on the bread. I love carbs, but in the summer I tend to not crave them as much. But in the winter, I could left to my own devices, probably have an entire loaf of French bread with different kinds of cheeses on it and be like, no, but it's cold. I'll shiver this, shiver it away. But yeah, that's good comfort food.
okay. Well, in our household, for New Year's Eve, traditionally, I make a pot of gumbo. Okay, my wife loves it, and that's my thing every year. I make chicken and sausage gumbo because I'm allergic to shellfish. So we have that. Now, because we had finished the gumbo up and then the weather uh, went south, I had to come up with something else. So I made a pot of black eyed peas. We had some dry beans in the pantry, so I made a pot of black eyed peas and found some turkey tails in the deep freezer and put that in there to season it up. And she was very appreciative of that. We had some eggnog left over from Christmas, so I mixed that up with some rum and made some cocktails out of that. That was great, but that didn't last for the entire 10 days that we had the cold snap. So then I was
Mm.
like, well, I still got the Christmas decorations up. I haven't taken the inside decorations down yet. I got some Jack Daniels. I got some Coca Cola. So I made a Jack and Jingle, and that got me through the last 5 days of the cold stretch here. And now that the weather is above freezing again, I'm really putting my sights towards spring at this point. I hope the groundhog in a few weeks, next week, week after next, sees his shadow and we can get this cut down to 6 weeks and get some warmer weather. All right, and that's about all, y'all, for this episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I want to thank our panelists this evening. Charlie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kellen.
And thank you, Marcette, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Calvin.
Yes. And Kosel, thank you.
Great being part of the discussion.
Dan the man, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Amy, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And we also want to thank our special guest, our guest panelist, Frank Townsend, for sitting in. Frank had to leave to get to a comedy gig, but we want to thank him as well. Our next episode of Diverse Talking Heads will take place in 2 weeks. But for this episode, that's about all. I'm your man, Calvin Gibbs, and it's always important that we take 2 steps to the rear and get on out of here. Until the next episode, exit stage left.